with reference to verse 28, we have said that anything that is detrimental to you has a pleasant beginning, which means it is nectar in the beginning and poison at the end. And anything that is beneficial to you has an unpleasant beginning, which is poison in the beginning and nectar in the end. Am I right? Anything that is detrimental to you has a pleasant beginning, which means it is poison in the beginning, nectar in the beginning and poison at the end. Anything that's beneficial to you has an unpleasant beginning, which is poison and nectar in the end. So the reference I would all want you to fall back is the 18th chapter of the Gita, verse 37 and verse 38, which talk about sattvic happiness and rajasic happiness respectively. So 37 speaks about sattvic happiness and 38 talks about rajasic happiness, or the false happiness we are talking about. Now, the question which I gather what was sought is, why is it that it is poison? Why is it the false happiness is poison to begin with? All we got to understand whether the concept, when he says it is either nectar or poison, when he says it is only in the initial stages, it's only to begin with. So no sooner it loses its nature or character, so that which is poison soon becomes nectarine. That which is nectarine, soon it becomes poisonous. So it's only the initial stages that it appears to be. Now, why is it poison? Why is anything that is beneficial to you poison? There are few arguments which will help you to think or ponder. First thing is, when you are seeking sattvic happiness is where you are trying to practice self-restraint or practice self-control. What makes sattvic happiness poisonous is because you are trying to practice this self-restraint or self-control. And when you want to restrain yourself, when you want to practice self-control, that exercise is uncomfortable. That exercise is actually detestable. You are going against the rush. You're going against the push of the mind and the senses, isn't it? The mind is drawn to the external world. The senses are also rushing to the external world. And when you want to practice self-control or self-restraint, you're going against the flow. The natural flow seems to be extroverted, and you're trying to practice a restraint and withdraw your senses. So intellect is trying to control the mind, and that makes it challenging. That makes it unpleasant, because you are trying to exercise a control where there is no exercise. And that makes it unpleasant. But on the contrary, rajasic happiness is in the 38th verse, he says, Rajasic happiness is derived when the sense objects establish a contact. Okay, there's a contact established with sense objects, he says, which is exactly the opposite. Sattvic happiness comes through self-restraint and self-control. Hariji, if you can just write that for everybody, please. Sattvic happiness arises from self-restraint / self-control. Rajasic happiness comes from sense contact with sense objects. I repeat, sattvic happiness arises when you practice self-restraint or self-control. And Rajasic happiness arises when the sense organs contact the sense objects. So it's contact driven. So anything that is contact driven, as we understood when we studied the verse in detail for the past couple of weeks, couple of classes, we learned that there is an instant gratification. And it is the instant gratification that gives you a pleasure or satisfaction. Therefore, he says it is nectarine to begin with. And why it is poison, that which is beneficial to you, why is it poison? Is because you're going against the natural flow. Like, for example, perhaps this would be a very powerful example to explain the concept. So when you see a rocket when it is taking off the launch pad, the maximum amount of effort is put in at the time of takeoff, isn't it? Until the first few minutes. I don't know how long it takes for it to go beyond the gravitational pull. The gravitational pull is so strong, you will have to, all the majority of the fuel and the effort is at the launch and takeoff. So you're going against the pull of the gravity. So that's the maximum effort. Thereafter, once it crosses beyond the gravitational pull, it just slides through that open space. Thereafter, it just glides. There's no, it's just giving it a little effort to keep it in course. What is the orbit or whatever they have to reach. Thereafter, there's no much effort. It's just trying to guide it. The main effort is to go beyond the pull. Similarly, the main effort in the sadhana is to control the initial push from the senses and the pull from the sense objects. It is that initial temptation, whether you conquer or you fall. If you fall, you are fallen for Rajasic happiness. If you conquer the initial push and pull, you are in for Sattvic happiness. I think this is the quintessential difference. You got to understand why Sattvic happiness is nectar, is poison, and why Rajasic happiness is nectar in the beginning. And thereafter, it soon loses its nature, it soon loses its character, and that which is poisonous becomes nectarine, and that which is nectarine soon ends up as poisonous and detrimental. And I hope this clarifies your concern. We were there about, but perhaps this particular point of self-control and self-restraint will establish why is Sattvic happiness unpleasant or poisonous. And this seems to be the rule. RPG?
Hariom Guruji.
Hariom, sir. So, is it clear?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the most practical examples is the study itself, right?
Oh, yeah.
So in the beginning, waking up at, and still sometimes a struggle, right? But waking up at 4:30, 5 o'clock, and getting into that rhythm, and going to the classes and sticking to it, and learning the method and all that. It was, and it still is, right? Because we're still just bala, and it's still tough, right? But it's so different. You talk about nectar as compared to 10 or 12 years ago. It's so different, right? And if you don't hang until you get out of that gravitational pull, and again, there's still things that pull, Guruji. I won't, I won't deny that, but it's the level of competency and patience to deal with that pull today is so different from 10 or 12 years ago. And so I would encourage anybody that's just starting on this journey. It will be tough in the beginning. It's very tough in the beginning. Just persevere and hang in there.
Absolutely. That's the word. That's the word. If you have faith in the teachings and the knowledge, and be a little consistent, I tell you, it is such a pleasure, such a joy, such an experience. And what is the gravitational pull we are fighting against?
I think it's the ease at which perceived or real, right? Perceived mostly, that you get some quote happiness or satisfaction from the world, right? It's the rocket ship is a wonderful metaphor, because it's the world that, the gravitational pull of the earth that's keeping the rocket from wanting to take off, right? It's the same thing in our own lives. It's the gravitational pull of family and friends and money and food and all these things that keep us bound, right, to the earth and to the world. And so trying to get beyond that and saying, Nati, not this, that's not important. It's tough, and there are certain pockets where it's tougher, right? Kids, tough, very tough, right? Family, tough. So, certain areas have more pull than others, but I would say that's, and that instant gratification that you get from whatever it is, food or movies or music or whatever, that creates a false sense of happiness, that we now understand is very transient. It's not permanent, because you have to, and I thought where you were going with the poison thing is you need more and more just to be normal, right? So let's take, whatever, pick a food or pick a movie or pick me. It's like you need more and more just to feel satisfied. And so that builds up like a drug, and to withdraw from that is just, it takes years, and that to flush that poison out of your system, years.
You're very pedantic, you're very poetic today. You're really in beautiful flow. Huh? No, you are spot on.
I found some rhythm over this weekend. I communicated with you on Friday, and something has just clicked. Something has clicked, this weekend, and so I'm very appreciative of these studies. But yeah, it's just some other things were said, and so you just have to, in the right way, not foregoing your obligation, and that's important. You can't just do it on a whim, right? Well, I'm not going to pay attention to a family member or a situation because, oh, that's attachment. No, that's not it. That's not it, but you, at the same time, you have to balance and know what your limits are, know when that other person's or other party's limits are. And that's a challenge. So sorry, I didn't mean to take over the conversation. My
No, no,
apologies.
no, no, not at all, not at all, not at all. In fact, you've been spot on in what you have shared your journey and your experience, and it helps to clarify what it takes from a personal front. I was only explaining the concept and how the philosophy is and what's the rationale, but when you approach it from your own personal experience, it adds to the value. But just to establish further that when we spoke of the gravitational pull, so what is that? What is it that we are constantly working against? And the self-control or self-restraint is against our own vasanas or desires. And the vasanas and desires are constantly binding you to the world and developing an attachment to the world. And when you want to get away from these worldly attachments and bondages and attach to the higher, this is the pull you're working against. The pull is to bind you to the world. And you are being bound because of your purva karma, because of your vasanas and your own desires. So wanting to take off to the higher, I don't doubt anybody's intention. You're very genuine and your intent is very true. But the question is, how much effort are you able to put in to get yourself freed from the clutches of the attachments? Because that's very strong. And it's only effort and persistent effort that helps you to get yourself liberated. How many times people have had failure in this what is that in the space technology? When it was not the first time they launched rocket, they conquered it. How many failures? How many times have we not seen these rockets failing? Even the moment the ignition and they blast at the site of the launch pad itself. How many rockets have not blown up few seconds of takeoff? It's not easy. So even to master that technically also is a great art. And similarly, it's not easy to develop that spirit of detachment. And that detachment, to gain detachment is poisonous. Once you're detached is nectarine. To practice detachment, remember, you can't practice detachment. Practicing detachment is living detachment. So trying to get to detachment is very, very difficult because you're going against the pull of your attachments. But once you reach that state, oh my God, it's like taking a load off your head. You don't know where to put it. And once you take it off, I said, oh my God, it's such a relief. I feel such ease. And attachment is nothing but mental baggage. Is there a way to quantify it? I do not know. Ramji, if you can help us quantify, what is the quantum of mental baggage people are carrying, Ji?
Hari Om Guru.
Hari Om, sir.
Well, I don't think it can be quantified in that sense. I mean, I'm not sure. I feel that people at some stage enjoy that quantity on their head because it gives them, like you said, instant gratification. So it keeps on growing and growing. But till it becomes a heavy burden that they can't carry and it affects them, I think so it will be like that. But I think they will feel the heaviness only when it has affected them adversely, either health-wise or mentally or whatever way. Then only they feel the weight. So I don't know how to quantify that, but it is something which is very, very much invisible type of a burden on the mind.
It is an invisible burden. Yes, absolutely. And I can understand we can't quantify it, but we must understand even if I put half a kilo on my head, I may have the strength to bear that weight of half a kg, but it is still a burden because it is not a part of me. If it is a part of me, there is no burden at all. Even if it's an ounce, it will start hurting you because it's not a part of you. So it's not the quantum here. We're talking of the spirit, as you rightly say, it's not a quantum. The question is, how long can I bear that weight? There's some capacity of strength. And the same thing, if I put 5 kgs or 50 kgs, instantly feel the burden. And that's why people buckle. So it's a matter of you buckle under the immense pressure. There's immense anxiety, immense attachment, immense selfishness, greed. All of this is, Sir Ramji, and I'm talking to everybody, what baffles me, I'm genuinely saying, what baffles me is, in spite of so much effort, in spite of all this sadhana, it is not easy to combat the force of your mind, the desires, the vasanas and attachments. It's not easy. And I agree, and I echo what Arpitji has said. I can't understand how people are managing who don't have this knowledge at all. It just baffles me. And then only solace I get is they're all shrouded in ignorance. That's their only solace they find, is they don't know what they're going through. Because with the knowledge, it's not easy. What makes everybody believe that they are fine, and what they claim to be fine, is coming out of ignorance. And that is staggering.
But Guruji, many times it is like a rat race. You know, if you are in that race, if you are in that rat race, there is no way you can slow down. So unless you get out of that race, I think the main decision people have to take is, am I in a race? Am I competing with somebody in amassing wealth? Am I competing with somebody in achieving worldly or contacting worldly pleasures? Am I competing with anybody? I think that level of insecurity which comes into the mind drives that attachment to desires. This is my feeling. I think many times it is the insecurity which drives people.
Correct. Very true. I think very well said, Ji. Very well said. Thank you. Yes, Vijay Ji. I think, and then Kamal Ji also wants to clarify perhaps something.
Pranam Guruji. Thought I would try to extend the concept of GForce, the resistance, because GForce is constant, whereas in this case, since we are entrenched with something which we are familiar, we recognize what kind of pleasures they give, and we are familiar with it and have perhaps a craving for that. So borrowing a little from Ram's point also, is that, it varies from person to person. This G-force, I think, varies. How deeply you are entrenched, to that extent you have to fight against that force. And more you've gone, and more you're craving for it, how more rajasic you are. I think it becomes, it requires a greater force to break out. And if you are to begin with, have fewer attachments, perhaps it's easier to break out. I mean, how much of the effort required is, I won't know. It varies from person to person. That's the only thought I think.
Sir, but nobody begins with fewer attachments. Only the rare few begin, sir. They are the highly evolved. So the majority are grounded, isn't it? So the G-force is pretty heavy, sir.
Some G-force is there with everyone, and it's more with some. That's about all, I guess.
Absolutely. I'm only clarifying by saying that G-force is heavy with most. Is very few are because of their purva karma, they have this calling, or they have taken off. Otherwise, many are grounded. But I appreciate your points, certainly. Okay. Thank you, Ji. Kamal Ji.
Namaskar, Guruji.
Namaskar.
I was thinking that as you asked the question about quantifying, one way I was thinking the quantification is by your conscious decisions. Because of your attachments, you're always tied to the past and you're making unconsciousness decisions. Your brain is programmed and you are taking a lot of decisions unconsciously. And a lot of studies have been done that we take, most of us take 99% of the time, unconscious decisions. We are not conscious. While conscious here means that we are too much attached. We are not in present, and we are kind of pre-programmed to react when an event happens. And that came to my mind as something we can quantify also, in addition to what different things you mentioned.
Correct. I think you're right. It's almost like an autopilot we're working.
Yeah, and a lot of studies have been done by neurologists, that I've seen, and a lot of programming, they say, through neurons has been done in our brains, but it can be changed. It's not that it cannot be changed, like our scriptures say, that we come with all the prarabdha karmas and attachments, but we can change those attachments if we don't produce further senseless attachments. And ultimately, the burden will reduce on our mind.
Indeed. In fact, it's mind over matter. It's subtle that controls the gross. So what with this Vedantic philosophy presents is far beyond all what psychology, all this medicine, all what science can argue, because they're still dealing with gross atoms and gross particles, even the minutest. But we are dealing with subtle matter.
Yeah,
subtle that controls the gross, isn't it?
There's been a lot of research on the consciousness for the last 15-20 years. And David Chalmers came out with this term, the hard problem of consciousness. They can't define the path from the subtle to the gross. All gross, all the mind can be related, but nobody knows the cause. And that has been the problem up till now.
Some of them are still trying to fathom what was established and declared hundreds and thousands of years ago. So They're still, as RPG very beautifully puts it, they all bala. Is that what you said? RPG, I want to hear from you. We all want to hear from you. How did you say the word bala? How did you say?
Oh, bala.
Correct.
We are children.
I like the accent, Again, please.
Bala.
No, don't change it. Be your original self.
That's how I said it.
No, you're third time you're changing it. So you're not your natural self. That's what I'm saying. Perfect. Right. Harishi, you got to put down your namaskar and wait for a while. Yes, Harishi. So little patience, please. I think Setuji and then Reddy Garu. Seduramanji.
Hari Om Guruji. I just wanted to share, maybe in practice, these things our elders used to know the intensity of attachment and all. In North India, they say when they give a girl in wedding, there is a habit of the parents of the girl, they don't even go to any time visit daughter's place. There is a saying that they don't wet their hands. That means they won't even have eat in that house. She has become, so they don't want to interfere in her affairs. She has become the part of the other family, and so that they don't have attachment to her. And today, on the contrary, in nucleus families, every stage, daughter consults mother, mother consults mother advises daughter. And there are cases where people don't give, if in marriage, if they are in the same town. I'm just saying this attachment, earlier generation, they, in part of the culture, they didn't have, they wanted to be, and a girl child particularly, they go on, used to say, you are going to go to other house. Remember, from childhood, they used to train them, and don't be attacked to us.
Interesting observation. Yes, culture has so profoundly, indirectly infused the spirit of detachment, you know. But that doesn't mean you can develop attachment to your son. Huh?
Yeah.
That doesn't mean it justifies to do the contrary. So it should apply to everything, isn't it? To every person,
Correct.
to every being, to everything. So, but
another sharing, just RPG same. Today, just I felt you can we are all experience pain to joy in instantly in an hour's time. Generally, this nectar to poison in many instances is over a long period. So we got up 1 hour back, and in another hours we get the nectar. So this transition is very little. One can experience.
right, sir. Appreciate. Yes. Thank you, Ji. Ready, Garu?
Pranam Guruji. I just would like to just correlate. There's a quantum of mental baggage is something we can able to correlate. A simple example of our attachment towards the mobile phones. In my view, able to hear me, Guruji?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Like we cannot able to really quantize the baggage, what we're carrying, but definitely once you detach with a mobile phone, we will know the what baggage we are carrying.
Absolutely. And my suggestion on this point is 10 minutes before the class, everybody switch off their phones. 10 minutes before the class, come 10 minutes before, switch it off. So you just attune to the bhajan, just get yourself mentally tuned in. Even that simple exercise will tell you how much attachment is there, isn't it, Ji?
Yes. In fact, I think it's much more if you compare with the racket force, the analogy which we have given very effectively here. I think much beyond in terms of the amount of addiction everyone is going through. It's nothing specific about the young generation or old generation, but I think we have fallen really prey to that thing. The hours are getting melted away without knowing.
Yeah. Life is melting away, sir.
That's true.
Life is gone, before you realize. Very true, very true. Right, sir. Thank you. But sideways in the chat box, Oshama has been very, we would like some insight and wisdom into that.
Namaste, Guruji. I mean, we see a lot of instances, Guruji, particularly of late, where these attachments or this thing are causing havoc in youngsters' marriages, be it mother-son or mother-daughter or whatever it is, whether they're in local or America or anywhere.
Whether in space or out of space, that's what you mean, isn't it?
Yes.
America is not what? Is out of space or what? Is it
no.
Is it
like
a La land somewhere? Or?
No, not like that. Sethuramanji just said that many are avoiding the local alliances he was just mentioning. So I just want to say, even if they're in US also, these things are happening all the more.
In fact, apart from the land, because there's nothing for or against any particular region, what we are, as you rightly said, the principle that is causing the problem. And as you mentioned it, perhaps it's worth reiterating and reminding ourselves the concept. What is attachment? Attachment causes, as you said, all relationships. It's a universal principle. What disrupts a relationship is attachment. And can you define attachment in 2 words? Or 3 words? What disrupts relationship is attachment. And how do you define attachment? In 3 words.
It's self-satisfaction, Guruji, and control over others, or satisfaction of your desires or
The
vasanas.
concept, the concept is right, not really vasanas, but
Desires,
how did
desire.
desires? I would actually say attachment is defined as love plus selfishness. When you abuse the love of others for your own selfish reasons, that destroys the harmony in any relationship, whether it be son, daughter, it could be husband, wife, it could be son, it could be any relationship that you set out there. As long as there's a selfishness in a relationship, it ruptures it, it spoils it all. So attachment is nothing but love plus selfishness. And pure love is selfishness minus attachment minus selfishness. So when you make your love pure by removing your selfishness, that relationship you are in flourishes. So today, every relationship is adulterated with your own selfishness. And that's the reason you find that relationships don't last, and doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't last. Isn't it?
But
thank you.
How
Yes,
do you say it is selfishness, Guruji? Like, for example, a mother is trying to control or, guide or whatever it is. According to her, it is guidance towards the daughters. It's not for her own purpose, isn't it? It's not for her own pleasure or.
My daughter.
Okay.
She, to that extent, doesn't identify with in-laws. So she sees her daughter right, in-laws wrong. Her son-in-law is wrong, my daughter is right. Condition to begin with. Even before you come to judgment, you're favoring your daughter because you seem to support her thought process than thinking open-mindedly towards other. So why isn't that attachment?
Yes.
My child, my daughter, she is right, everybody's wrong. So that conditioning, it's, you're not being a witness to a situation and say, what is the problem?
Yeah.
In fact, if you are a person who is in a position to counsel, if the daughter comes to you with a problem, you will say where she's wrong. If your son-in-law comes to you, you must tell son-in-law where he's going wrong.
Yeah.
So you'll tell your daughter to understand his personality and relate to him. And when you're talking to son-in-law, advise him that understand her nature and adapt to her nature.
Yeah.
So the advice is each one should learn to see how they can relate to the other person. So means what is their flaw. But no mother will counsel her daughter and say where you are wrong. You always support where you think you are right and that they're wrong. So I'm not saying necessarily this is a thought process. I'm saying this could be a certain reason to justify why we say selfishness. But the definition is where there is a selfishness in any relationship. Now, any relationship, where there's selfishness, it doesn't last. But where there is a spirit of sacrifice, it lasts, it flourishes. There's a freshness. There's a freshness in a relationship as long as the spirit of sacrifice is. What can I do to other person? It's vibrant. Relationship thrives. And that's the reason one of the most profound relationships is Rajima, what is the most profound of all relationships?
Guru Shishya relationship.
Guru Shishya. The Guru is doing everything he can to help the student evolve with the only interest of trying to serve the student. And the student is burdened with the gratitude and wants to serve back to the society, including the Guru and the society. So there is that spirit of service and sacrifice in that purest of relationships. And if we can borrow that spirit and instill it into every other relationship we establish, it's not that this relationship is divine, everything else is non-divine. It's not so, isn't it? So the spirit, the principle that matters. All right. Shama, is it okay? Right. Sorry, Harishji, you had to wait too long, but
Hariom Guruji.
Yes, sir. Hariom, sir.
I think so much has been said. Probably what I'm going to say is going to set the clock back a little and go back in time. But when talking of burdens and attachment and all that, I thought that if you look at the fundamental principle of physics of inertia, of the law of inertia, it sort of lays a scientific construct to the whole thing and very simple to understand, which says that the law of inertia says that work is done or energy is expended or a force is applied only to change the present state of anything. So too with our lives, when you are following the mind, etc., and then you're talking of the intellect coming into control, it's only that when you want to change the present flow or when you want to control the present flow, the principle of inertia kicks in, and that's where the effort, the energy, the unpleasantness, the expense of work done, etc., comes in. And it continues to be so till you have adopted that state, and therefore no more force is required to change your state, which is akin to when you have adopted the wisdom and when it has become part of you, and therefore no longer is it required to change your state. So the fundamental principle being that you will continue to face unpleasantness in the beginning, you will continue to make the effort, continue to feel the burden, as long as it is a change to your present state. And that, I think, brings in the concept of being able to operate on the intellect, with the intellect, rather, not on, with the aid of the intellect, and not only on the mind, which is going with the flow.
Perfect. In fact, you're right. You're very, very right. The law of inertia, which we call it in philosophical terms, tamas, isn't it? So law of inertia is tamas. Perfect. I think that should settle verse 28. Jimmy Kiragaru.
Pranam Guruji.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar. Hari Om.
There are so much developed countries. There is found that by 18 years old, the girls or boys, they've seen everything. And there the more suicides are going because that is the age, the student life itself, smoking, which is caused totally their health, and also the liquor, what is the consumption of the liquor, and also the contact sense. That is, these are all things which by 18 years age, everything is done, then they don't know what is next. And depression, that is whatever. Same, the glass of water, if you hold for 5 ounces or 3 ounces, if you long, the more, if 1 hour you can, very difficult. But every minute, it becomes such a painful to the hand, which you can't. So you have to keep it, the glass, every time on the table. You can't hold it like that for a long time. The same, the senses contact, the same principle. If you just attach and become addicted, that is what the whole world today is teaching us. Be careful about the senses. So
be very careful. Correct. Very rightly said, sir. Very rightly said. In fact, throughout the Gita, they say one who has his senses under control, his wisdom is established. Tasya prajna pratishtita. One who has his indriyas under control. A whole Shastra talks about it, and you are rightly said. But only correction is you're being little liberal by giving 18. I think all of it finishes by the time they're 13, 14, 15. It's all done. By that time, then the high school, everything they've experienced. There's nothing more in life for them to experience. So that kind of license they've got to the senses, and then it causes a lot of damage. And you said depression is the first thing that kicks in.
The same thing Ravana. He controlled his all senses and made tapas and got everything. The whole, the God is given the power, the equivalent to him. And the moment he got the power, so all these senses, it became like a snakes. They come out, and the way he wants to everything whole, not only this place in Indralok, and also this brother, what he has got, the Pushpa Viman, that is Brospati, not Brospati, his name is his own brother, the Pushpa Viman.
Right.
He was just, if he doesn't give, he will kill him. The type of
he fell a prey to greed.
Not able to control his senses. For everything, whatever is good, that he wants for himself. That is the level. Even after conquering the senses, that is on temporary, expecting something for the power. They do it, like, yoga, meditation, they do. But the moment is over, they get some power and again come into the contact with the senses. They ultimately ruin.
Correct. No, classic example. Very true. Ravana is a classic example. You have done so much tapas, and yet you abuse it for something gross. Thank you, Jay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Namaskar.